Good morning, everyone. This is Professor Hill. Just a short video for our class Introduction to Ethics Philosophy 2306 here at St. Philip's College for the summer one term of 2023. Today is Saturday, the 17th of June, 2023. We're at the end of our second week. We finished reading chapter 2. We're looking at the second case study. You're writing your essays, and they're due tomorrow night, midnight, Sunday night. They're always going to be Sunday night, well, at least till we get to the very end. And so I wanted to just make a few comments. Yes, it's Saturday morning, and I'm here at the office because this is a short 5-week condensed class, which means we kind of got to work all the time to get it done. It's just not a regular course period. It's condensed means we just got to get a whole bunch of work done in a short period of time. So look, I promised I would say something about chapter 2, and I did want to make a couple of quick comments about it. I've got the book in my hand, Doing Ethics by Louis Vaughn. And what I wanted to say is that when you open it up and you look just even at the title, it lists 3 things. It says subjectivism, relativism, and emotivism. And they're kind of in one big bucket over here together. But when you start reading the chapter, suddenly there's a 4th thing, not mentioned in the title, but in the opening, and even in the little quick review box at the beginning, he also throws in objectivism. And he says, look, objectivism is simply the theory that moral truths exist and that they do so independently of what individuals or societies think of them. So there are these moral truths. They're out there. They exist separate and independent of societies and of human beings. And so you'll think to yourself, well, that sounds relatively important. And he mentions it at the beginning. In fact, it's the very first concept he mentions in the chapter. But then the whole chapter, it goes on for page after page after page, talking about subjectivism, relativism, and emotivism. And he doesn't mention objectivism again. He just defines it that way and then moves on. So what you'll see is that the whole chapter is him talking about and really kind of defining and then pointing out all the flaws with these 3 moral theories: subjectivism, relativism, and emotivism. And in fact, even in the quick review box, I mentioned the definition he has of objectivism. He then goes on to list the other 3 and their definition. But with each one, he also has this little thing called implications, which he doesn't have for objectivism. But even in that little quick review box, it's the definition, and then right away, what's wrong with this? So the whole chapter is devoted not to giving you a definition and pros and cons. It's just the definition and all the cons. This is all the things that are wrong with these things. And so you're not getting a balanced picture of pros and cons of these 3 things. In fact, and you're getting nothing about objectivism except one sentence, which is fascinating because it turns out he starts off by talking about subjective relativism, why that doesn't make any sense, what's wrong with that. Gets to cultural relativism, and then goes on page after page after page talking about cultural relativism, why it's a silly idea, why it doesn't work. And then at the very end, as he's transitioning to emotivism, for the 3rd thing that he's going to tear down, he does mention objectivism. This is the only time he does in the whole chapter, except for that opening part. And it just says this. The crux of the matter is that cultural relativism does a poor job of explaining some important features of our moral experience. So he's summing up, saying this is bad, this is wrong, doesn't work. And then there's this one sentence. A far better explanation of these features is that some form of moral objectivism is true. And then he just moves on to talking about emotivism and what's wrong. So here's the thing. he does list 4 things at the very beginning and even in the quick review box. But the whole chapter is about 3 of those things, which is why it's called subjectivism, relativism, emotivism, and what's wrong with them. And as far as objectivism, we get one sentence that just says, it's true. So my point about chapter 2 is that you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, because he's not really trying to objectively, fairly describe these concepts. He's putting them all in the same bucket, tearing them down, and saying objectivism is true. Doesn't go so far as to even talk about the pros and cons of objectivism, because there are some cons as well as some pros. Just defines it, says it's true, and moves on. So you got to remember that in this case, in this chapter, he's talking about these 3 big concepts, but he's there to torpedo them because he's selling one of them, and he's selling objectivism. So you got to remember that, because this is going to set up where we go next. Because next week, we're going to skip over chapter 3. Don't forget, don't read chapter 3. Go straight to 4. And chapter 4 is going to set up our next big kind of moral framework of theories and talk about consequentialism and non-consequentialism. And we'll get there. That's next week. But right now, this is not a fair, unbiased evaluation. He's not a critic who's trying to, really be he's the salesman here. He's saying objectivism is right, move on. So keep that in the back of your head as you're reading chapter 2 and as you're applying it. And look, because I've had some people, I've been getting lots of questions saying, I keep reading this and I'm thinking about my own views, but I don't know what best describes my views. Am I thinking like an objectivist? Am I thinking like a cultural relativist? And so I've been trying to give people some feedback around what the definitions are and what they're rooted in. And it's as at this point, again, we're at the very beginning, it's chapter 2. You got to think about it this way. Objectivism is saying there are these moral truths, there are rules, there are principles. And it's kind of like other things that are objectively true, like math or science, like gravity. Gravity is independent of us, doesn't care what we think about it. It's just kind of there and is objectively true. And you can test it, right? And that's how we know. So it's our job to learn about gravity, understand it as a definition, and then, apply it. Remember it, watch, here's an experiment. It works. So what they're saying, the objective is saying that morality works the same way. Ethics works the same way. It's our job to just learn what these truths are, these moral principles, and then live by them, apply them in our lives. So if you think there's a set of rules and there's principles that are at stake, and I'm just going to apply those to a case study like John the paramedic, you might say what he did was right or wrong because, look, here's this truth, and John's actions reflect that. They're in alignment with that. Or he broke this rule that I've learned and is true and objective. Or you might say that, look, societies are shaped, because again, this is like some of the stuff that from the very first module when we were talking about chapter 1 and about how societies grow and change and how their values, even in a single society, change over time. Look at, pick anything, slavery in the United States. It was the law, it was legal, it was widely accepted, it was reinforced and taught from the pulpit every Sunday at church because it's biblical. But what happened was, slowly over time, our values, our thinking about that issue changed. And then once the culture shifted, once our values shifted, the law followed. Again, don't get me wrong, it was complicated, civil war, lots going on. But this was also a reflection of a worldwide shift. And the fact that the law follows the cultural values, it got perfectly kind of summed up and encapsulated by Mark Twain, who had a way with words. And Mark Twain famously used just 6 words to say this, which is that the law is sand, custom is rock. The law is sand, custom is rock. And what he meant is, look, the laws change based upon the custom. That's what's at the bottom. So, but it turns out even customs change, and so the laws follow that way. So back on what we're talking about here, cultural relativism. Cultural relativism, he even talks about this in the first chapter a little bit about absolutism. We'll have to come back to that. But it turns out it's this simple. As human beings spread around the globe, we ended up in lots of different places with lots of different languages and customs and habits and ways of doing things and dress and food and language. And a lot of times, it's just, even though we're all human beings, we end up with very different customs. Look, just travel, look at language. And so the fact of the matter is that these cultures also ended up with very different morals. You can see that when you do descriptive ethics and you just describe how different cultures think differently about moral issues, which is why I put that survey in the very first module about how cultures think differently about everything from like adultery to drug use to, all kinds of moral issues. And even just gambling and alcohol. These are big, giant moral issues in some places and not even considered moral issues in other places. There are cultural differences out there. And so the fact of the matter is, once you begin to reflect on the fact that you are shaped by the time and place where you're born. I was born in Houston, Texas. I'm a Texan. I speak English. I look the way I do. These are all a reflection of in a big picture, the cultural development of the society into which I was born. And so I have certain values that I think are important. They have shaped my morality, and that gets reflected in my ethical decision making. So if you think that I'm being driven by values shaped by my family, by my religion, also a part of my culture, it's not a big fact. Not a big shock that I was raised Roman Catholic, born into a big Roman Catholic family, went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, Catholic college. And I'm not, a Shinto or a Hindu. Now, again, United States, hey, we're the big melting pot. God knows we have a mix of lots of different cultures and traditions and religions and languages. But the fact of the matter is that, a lot of the world, the societies are much more homogeneous. You travel through India, you travel through Japan, you travel through Nigeria, and you're going to see, again, much more homogeneous population in those societies, despite all the interaction, all the travel, all the communication, everything else, which marks our modern world. God knows San Antonio is a multicultural, complex city. But this is all back to making this distinction between my approach to things. Is it objective, meaning that it's rule-based, principle-based, or is my thinking value-based? And my values have been shaped by my culture, by my family, by my upbringing, my religion, my schools, my teachers, my coaches, all those people. So here's the thing. I can lay that out for you, but I can't tell you what you're thinking. You've got to do that. You've got to tell me what you think best describes your approach to making difficult ethical decisions. Give that a shot. And again, let's assume we finished reading chapter 2. We're looking at the case study. We're writing, we're thinking, we're typing, getting ready to hand these things in tomorrow night, midnight. So you still got, a day and a half, but still get to work on it. If you got questions, let me know. I've been trying to field them as they come in. Just have gotten lots of good questions about this particular issue and from students who are doing the right thing, which is they're asking me this question, which is, what describes my thinking? Because that's the right question. I just might not be able to help you as much as you think. You got to think and reflect upon your own critical decision-making process and which one do you think it most aligns with in terms of like objectivism or culturalism, or even some of the other things, although that's a harder sell in terms of like emotivism. And because don't forget, emotivism is not saying I make decisions based on my emotion. That's not what that's saying. You got to look at subjective relativism and emotivism for what they are. And again, all that's in chapter 2. All right. You can do it. If that made things worse instead of better, write me and let me know, and I'll do it one by one with you. Anyway, take care. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye. I hope you're having a good weekend. I hope you're not stuck in the office someplace working. Bye.